Story 1. It was one of those nights where the rain refused to stop. The storm had swallowed the sky, and every drop of water sounded like footsteps pounding against the pavement. Daniel was driving home from a late shift, his car crawling down a nearly deserted highway. His wipers fought against the rain, but the harder they moved, the less he could see. It was past midnight, the kind of time where every shadow looks alive and every sound feels too close. As the thunder rolled in, Daniel noticed something strange up ahead, a figure standing on the shoulder of the road, completely drenched. At first, Daniel thought it was just some drunk guy trying to get home, but as his headlights cut through the rain, he realized the man wasn't moving. He wasn't even signaling for help. He was just standing there. Daniel slowed down, heart pounding. He knew he shouldn't stop. Every horror story he'd ever heard told him to keep driving, but something about the man's stillness made his stomach twist. He pressed the brakes, the car jerking as it slowed beside the figure, rolling down the window just an inch. Daniel let the rain drip inside. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. The man leaned forward. His face was pale, too pale for a living person. His wet hair clung to his cheeks, covering part of his eyes. Then, in a whisper that barely cut through the storm, the man said something Daniel would never forget. "You shouldn't stop. They're watching you." The voice wasn't desperate. It wasn't begging for help. It was a warning, a cold, lifeless warning. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. And in that split second, when he looked again, the man was gone, completely gone. The road was empty. Daniel's hands shook as he rolled the window back up. His brain screamed at him to leave, to get as far away as possible. Slamming his foot on the gas, he sped forward, tires hissing against the wet pavement. But no matter how hard he tried to calm down, he couldn't shake the image of that pale face. The rain thickened, hammering the windshield like fists. Daniel gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, his heart racing faster than the storm outside. He glanced at the rearview mirror, only to feel his blood run cold. Someone was in the back seat. The figure, the same pale, soaked man, sitting silently, his head tilted, water dripping onto the seat, his lips curved into a faint smile. Daniel's chest tightened. He could barely breathe. Every muscle in his body screamed to stop the car, to jump out, but his foot pressed harder against the gas instead. His reflection in the mirror showed wide, terrified eyes, and the man's black, lifeless stare burning right back into him. Thunder boomed overhead. Lightning lit the sky for a split second, and Daniel swore he saw more figures standing along the road, barely visible through the sheets of rain, watching, just like the pale man had warned. The car suddenly jerked. The engine sputtered, then died completely. Daniel's vehicle rolled to a stop in the middle of the storm. His headlights flickered once, then went dark. The only light left was the occasional strike of lightning. When Daniel turned around, the back seat was empty, but the seat was soaked, puddles of water dripping into the carpet. His heart hammered as he reached for the door handle, desperate to escape, when something caught his eye. On the fogged-up window beside him, words had been written by an unseen hand, letters drawn into the condensation, clear as day. "We're not done." The storm roared louder, swallowing his scream, as everything around him went black. Story 2. The rain had been falling all evening, heavy enough to flood the gutters and drown out every sound in the small town. Emily sat in her bedroom, curled under a blanket, trying to read a book while the storm raged outside. Her parents had gone out for dinner, leaving her alone in the house. She wasn't scared, at least, not at first. She liked the rain. It made the world feel calmer. But around midnight, the storm grew worse. Lighting flashed so bright, it turned her room into a strobe of white light. Thunder followed like the cracking of giant bone. She closed the book, deciding to go to bed early. As she reached over to turn off her lamp, she heard it. A knock. Her body froze. It wasn't the door. It wasn't even the roof or siding being hit by branches. No, it was at her window. Emily's room was on the second floor. She sat perfectly still, the sound of rain rushing in her ears, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination. But then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Her heart climbed into her throat. Gathering the courage, she turned her head toward the window. For a moment, it was just rain streaking down the glass. Nothing unusual. Then lighting struck, and for less than a second, she saw a face pressed against the glass. Pale, smiling, eyes too wide to be human. She screamed, stumbling back, nearly tripping over her chair. When she looked again, the window was empty. Emily grabbed her phone with trembling hands, dialing her parents. But the line wouldn't connect. The storm had knocked out the signal. She ran to her bedroom door, yanking it open, ready to flee downstairs. But something stopped her dead in her tracks. On the hallway wall, written in water, were words, clear, dripping letters that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Don't leave me." Her hands shook so violently she could barely keep hold of the phone. She sprinted down the stairs, heart pounding. But halfway through, the lights went out. The entire house sank into darkness, except for the brief flashes of lighting illuminating the windows. And in every flash, Emily swore she saw someone standing outside, on the lawn, in the rain, watching her. She bolted into the living room, grabbing the landline phone. No dial tone, just static. And beneath the static, breathing, slow, heavy breathing. She dropped the receiver, her chest tightening. That's when the knocking started again. Not upstairs this time, but downstairs, at the window right beside her. Her head turned slowly, every part of her begging not to look. And there it was, the same pale face, only this time, it was inside. Story 3. Jake was a night shift worker who hated driving home in the rain. But that night, he didn't have a choice. The storm had turned the streets into rivers, and visibility was so low he could barely see the road. His only relief came when he spotted the small bus stop. Up ahead, an old wooden shelter with a bench inside. He pulled over to wait out the worst of the storm. The shelter creaked in the wind, the rain hammering down on the tin roof. Jake sat inside, dripping wet, scrolling through his phone. For a few minutes it felt almost peaceful. Then he realized he wasn't alone. At the far end of the bench sat a woman. She was wearing a long black coat, her hair soaked, dripping water, onto the floor. He hadn't even noticed her when he walked in. She sat perfectly still, her head slightly bowed, as if she hadn't moved in hours. Hi, Jake muttered nervously. The woman didn't answer, didn't even blink. Her silence made the storm outside seem louder. He tried to ignore her, checking his phone again, but the battery had died. Now it was just him, the storm, and the silent figure beside him. Then, without warning, she spoke. Her voice was low, broken, like it hadn't been used in years. "They never leave this place." Jake's skin crawled. "What do you mean?" he asked. But the woman didn't respond. She just kept staring at the rain, her lips twisted into the faintest unnatural smile. Jake's pulse quickened. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the woman again. She hadn't moved an inch, but the puddle forming beneath her looked darker than rainwater, almost red. Suddenly the storm grew quiet. No thunder, no wind, just silence, heavy and suffocating. Jake swallowed hard, his breath fogging the cold air. He decided he couldn't stay there any longer. He stood up to leave, but froze when he saw something through the glass of the bus stop. Figure, dozens of them, standing in the rain, all facing the shelter, their pale faces expressionless, their eyes locked on him. Jake's heart pounded. He turned to the woman, desperate for answers, but the seat was empty. She was gone. The door of the shelter creaked open by itself. Cold rain blew inside,
and the figures outside took one slow step forward. Jake backed away, whispering to himself that this wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then he looked at the bench again. Carved into the wood, deep and rough, were words that hadn't been there before. You wait, you stay. The storm roared back to life, drowning out his scream as the figures closed in.